following the JAM 2020 chemistry question paper, and we had already solved the first 10 questions from this question paper. Now let's look at the next 5 questions. Moving on to question number 11. At constant pressure, the chemical potential temperature diagram for a pure substance that sublimes is. 4 diagrams have been shown, 4 options, and out of this we have to choose which is the diagram for a sublimable substance. Sublimable means a substance that goes from the solid state directly to the gaseous state. So which will be the chemical potential temperature diagram for such a substance? So we have to keep in mind that the chemical potential decreases with an increase in temperature. Now, if that is true, option B and option D are wrong, because here we find that the chemical potentials are increasing with an increase in temperature in both these diagrams. So option B and option D are wrong. So either our option A or option C is correct. Now let's look at option A. If you look at option A, we have again 3 lines for the solid phase, liquid phase and gas phase. And another thing we have to remember is that the most stable phase at a particular temperature is the phase that has the lowest chemical potential. So the most stable phase is the phase that has the lowest critical potential at a particular temperature. So at this temperature, the solid phase has the lowest chemical potential. That means till this point, till this intersection point, till this temperature, the solid phase is the most stable. And after this, the liquid phase, the line for the liquid phase has the lowest chemical potential. That means after this temperature, this substance will exist in the liquid phase. That means this intersection point is the melting point. Okay, so before this point, the chemical potential for the solid phase is the smallest, and after this point, the liquid phase shows the smallest chemical potential. That means that phase is more stable. Now moving forward, we say as we move forward, as we increase the temperature, we reach another point where after which the gas phase line shows the least chemical potential. That means after this point, the gas phase is the most stable. That means this is the boiling point. You can consider this as the boiling point. So here we know clearly that we see clearly that from the solid phase, the substance is moving to the liquid phase, and then it moves to the gas phase. When you look at option C, here you find that around this temperature, till this intersection point, till this temperature, again the solid phase is the most stable phase. And as you go forward beyond this intersection point, you find that the gas phase has a lower chemical potential. That means from this point to this point, the gas phase is the most stable phase. That means this point you can consider it as the sublimation point. So clearly option C is the correct answer, because this shows that this compound, this pure substance, is a sublimable substance. So the correct answer is option C. Moving on to question number 12. The force constant for hydrogen chloride and deuterium chloride are the same, and both can be considered as harmonic oscillators. Hydrogen chloride has a fundamental vibrational transition at 2886 centimeter inverse. The ratio of the 0-point energy of hydrogen chloride to that of deuterium chloride is. Now, so we have to find here the ratio of 0-point energy of hydrogen chloride divided by the 0-point energy of deuterium chloride. Now, what is the formula for 0-point energy? It is half h nu, where nu is the frequency. So that means half h nu of hydrogen chloride divided by half h nu of deuterium chloride. Now, because half h is a constant, half h will get cancelled, and we can get the 0-point energy of hydrogen chloride divided by deuterium chloride is equal to the frequency of hydrogen chloride divided by the frequency of deuterium chloride. Because half h is common, we can get that gets cancelled. So the ratio of 0-point energy now equals nu frequency of hydrogen chloride divided by frequency of deuterium chloride. Now, what is the formula for frequency? Substituting for frequency, we can put frequency is 1 by 2 pi multiplied by square root of K by M, where K is the force constant and M is the reduced mass. But force constant, they say that it is the same for both hydrogen and deuterium chloride. So if force constant is the same for hydrogen and deuterium chloride, 2 pi is a constant, then 1 by 2 pi and this square root of K will get cancelled in both. And so the ratio of the frequency of hydrogen chloride divided by the frequency of deuterium chloride will depend only on the reduced masses, because the rest will get cancelled. And because the reduced mass is in the denominator, the ratio will be equal to reduced mass of deuterium chloride divided by the reduced mass of hydrogen chloride. What is reduced mass? The formula for reduced mass is mass of hydrogen into mass of chlorine divided by mass of hydrogen plus mass of chlorine. And for the case of deuterium chloride, the reduced mass is mass of deuterium into multiplied by the mass of chlorine divided by the mass of deuterium plus the mass of chlorine. So substituting this in this formula, we will get, you can work this out, you will get 1.395. Here the mass of chlorine is 35, as they have mentioned in the question, chlorine is 35. A hydrogen we know is 1, and for deuterium the mass is 2. So substituting that, we will end up with 1.395. So the answer for this problem is option C, 1.395. Moving on to question number 13. The correct statement regarding the determinants of matrices R, S and T is. So three matrices are given and we have to find the relationship between these three matrices and we have to choose which is correct out of these four options. Now, how do you find the determinants of this? You might have studied this in your lower classes. For example, if you take matrix R, what you do is you take the first number, in this case 3, and then excluding the row and the column that of that particular number, this row and column of 3, what is remaining is this 4 numbers. So what we'll write, 3 multiplied by, in the brackets, open the bracket, 5 times 8 minus 7 times 3. Like here, you can write this. Now you put another minus sign, you take the next number 2. Now you exclude the row that makes up this 2 and the column that makes up this number 2. What is remaining is 4 and 8 and 7 and 1. So you cross multiply them. 4 multiplied by 8 minus 7 multiplied by 1. So you put minus 2 into 4 multiplied by 8 minus 7 multiplied by 1. Next you put a plus. So it will go minus plus like that. Plus you take the next number 4. 4 you exclude this row and the column which includes 4, and the remaining is this 4 digits. So you take 4, open the bracket, 4 multiplied by 3 minus 5 multiplied by 1. So this is how you solve a determinant. And when you do this, you will get 35 for determinant R. Likewise, you solve for determinant S and you find the determinant T. So all these three matrices, you will find the determinants and these are the numbers, and you will see from here that determinant R is equal to determinant T, which is not equal to determinant S. So determinant R, option B actually, determinant R is equal to determinant T, which is not equal to determinant S. So option B is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 14. The boil temperature is defined as the temperature at which the properties of a real gas coincides with those of an ideal gas in the low pressure limit. The graph that shows the pressure dependence of the compression factor for a real gas at the boil temperature TB is. So which is the graph that out of these four options, which is the option which shows the pressure dependence of the compression factor Z for a real gas at the boils temperature? So here is a diagram which is pretty much clear. This is a diagram of which shows the compressibility factor versus the pressure. Here you will see that the straight line here is for the ideal gas, the perfect gas. This straight parallel line, horizontal line, is for the perfect gas. You'll see that there is The compressibility factor is 1. It remains a constant actually throughout the pressure range. The compressibility factor for a ideal gas remains 1. Whereas for a non-ideal gas, it shows a slope for either a positive slope or a negative slope. So it shows a slope for non-ideal gases. And you see the red line here is the curve or the line for the non-ideal gas at higher temperatures, and this is the curve for non-ideal. The blue line is the curve for the non-ideal gas at lower temperatures. And at Boyle's temperature, the green curve is the curve that shows for a gas at Boyle's temperature. So you see there is something special about this Boyle's temperature is that for at the lower pressure limit, at the lower pressure limit, the Boyle's temperature at the Boyle's temperature, you will see at the lower pressure limit, the gas more or less over a wide range of pressure here, acts as an ideal gas. Okay, that is only for the Boyle's temperature you'll find that. So here the slope is almost 0 for the Boyle's at the Boyle temperature. Gas at the Boyle's temperature, in the lower pressure limit, the gas almost behaves like an ideal gas. It's almost horizontal in the lower pressure limit for a gas at the Boyle's temperature. So this green line, you see that curve, and where is that curve? You see this option B. That is which shows which is comparable to the curve for a Boyle's temperature curve. So you see this is what I'm talking about. At the lower pressure limit, it's almost as good as the ideal gas. Ideal gas curve line is shown by that dotted line. The dotted line shows that compressibility factor versus pressure curve for the ideal gas, and at the lower pressure limit it's almost the same at Boyle's temperature. So this option B is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 15. It's from organic chemistry. The major product formed in the following reaction sequences. So there are 3 reagents that has been given. So this is a cyclohexenone. So it's a cyclic ketone. You see the first reagent is Grignard reagent, ethyl magnesium bromide in the presence of ether as solvent. And when you react with the Grignard reagent, the Grignard reaction takes place. We will get the MgBr gets attached to the oxygen, the electronegative oxygen, because it has a positive, slightly positive in nature. And the R part of the Grignard reagent, that is the ethyl, it will have a negative charge to it. So it will attack this carbon here. And so ethyl will get bonded here, and on hydrolysis, the OMgBr will be split and you'll end up with an OH. So you will get this compound after your first reaction with your first reagent. Now the second reagent is an oxidizing reagent with chromium oxide with dichloromethane as the solvent. So with chromium oxide, oxidation takes place, and basically you will get an ketone here, cyclic ketone. You see a double bond O group here. And this, on further reaction, for the next reagent is with an ylide, phosphorus ylide. So a Wittig reaction takes place in the solvent tetrahydrofuran. Wittig reaction takes place. And what does Wittig reagent do? That double bond O, it is usually the double bond O is replaced by that olefin double bond CH2. So Wittig reagents react with aldehydes or ketones, and you will get that olefinic part attached to that carbon. So this is what you end up with, the product after the 3 reagents, the 3 reactions with the 3 reagents, the Grignard reaction, oxidation, and Wittig reaction. So the correct option is option B. This is what the product of this reaction will be. Okay, thank you.